Hey, in this tutorial, we're going to take a look at making use of local notifications in a NativeScript Android and iOS application. So just to give a little backstory here, local notifications are not the same as push notifications. Local notifications are generally triggered via some kind of time stamp rather than being pushed to your device from a server. So common use case is maybe you're using your application to detect iBeacons, and when you become in range of an iBeacon, maybe you want to show some kind of notification. This would be one of many possibilities on why local notifications are useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a new Android project from scratch. I'm doing Android because it is the more common platform that's supported across many different operating systems. You can do this for iOS as well, as long as you have a Mac, but to cover the most ground and accommodate the most people, I will be demonstrating this through Android. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new project. We're going to go ahead and create this new project on our desktop. What we can do is we can type in TNS create, and then what we want to do is we want to type in a project name. So let's go ahead and say, I don't know, notify project, and then hit enter. All right, so with the project created, let's go ahead and navigate into it. I'll drag this icon a little closer here. So that's it on my desktop. So let's go ahead and see, do cd notify project. So we're inside of it now, and we're going to say TNS platform add Android. Perfect. So we just added the Android platform. Now we need to add the plugin that we're going to use to make use of these notifications. So you could technically just add the notification code directly into your JavaScript because NativeScript does allow you to interface with native Objective-C and Java. But to make life a little easier on us, we're going to use a plugin for this. So we can go ahead and do the following. TNS plugin add NativeScript local notifications. Great. So now the plugin has been added and we can start to open up our project. So we're going to do all of our coding within the app directory, but I'm going to go ahead and just open up the entire project. I opened it in Atom, which is a free editor by GitHub, but you can use whatever you want. So like I said, we're going to be in the app directory, and we're going to be working with 3 files. So we're going to be working with the main page.js, which I like to think of as a controller. In NativeScript lingo, it's called a model. We're going to be working with the main page XML file, which is going to handle all of our UI. And finally, we're going to be working with the main view model, which is going to be our view model, which is going to handle all of the data that will be bound to the UI. So this will be all of the data with our bindings. So as far as starting goes, let's go ahead and start inside of this main view model, and we're going to work backwards. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add an include here. We want to include that plugin that we just created. Well, not created, installed. So we're going to say var local notifications equals require NativeScript local notifications. We're going to add another line. We're going to say var dialogues equals require UI/dialogues. We're doing this because we're actually going to show a pop-up notification should a notification be clicked on. So go ahead and save what we have so far. Let's go ahead and wipe out this function right here. We're actually going to create a different function. This is going to be the function that gets called when a notification is clicked from outside the application. So let's go ahead and give that a name. We're going to say function do add on message received callback. And you can really call it whatever you want. but I'm going to call it that. Inside of this, we're going to add some notification code, and this actually comes from the plugin documentation itself. Local notifications, add on message received callback. And you can see where that name came from, where I called the function. I named it similarly to what's actually inside of the documentation. So inside of this, we have a function, notifications. Actually, let's call it notification data. And we're going to add what to do with this notification data that we received. So in our case, we're going to say dialogues dot alert, and we're going to show a simple alert. So let's say something like I don't know, title notification received. And then for the message in lowercase, let's say, I don't know, let's say this is going to be the title of our notification. You could add a whole lot more to this, but we're going to keep it simple. Perfect. Oh, don't want to add the semicolon. So I mean, you could add stuff like notification data.message, the ID. There's all kinds of different stuff that you can add. But I'll let you play around with it yourself. You could also view the write-up that I did, which contains a little bit more than what you see here. So again, I decided to show a alert. What you would probably do in reality is you would probably save the notification itself into say application settings or SQLite, and then when your application finishes loading, you can perform some kind of action after reading to see if something was saved. So maybe you store the notification ID, and then you tell your application, look to see if a notification was received after it's finished loading. If it was received, read it, and then perform an action. Maybe navigate to a different screen. Maybe who knows what you want to do with it. That's totally up to you. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to start working with the create view model. So inside of the create view model, we're actually going to wipe out these two variables because they're not relevant to this particular application. But let's go ahead and add some variables of our own. So we're going to say view model dot ID equals 0. So we're basically just setting some default values because we're going to have a form in the UI, and if this UI, if we decide not to enter values, we're just going to default them. So we're going to say view model dot title equals let's call that notification title. View model dot message equals notification message. You know what? Sorry. Let's call this body. This is what we want. View model dot ticker equals notification ticker. So the ticker is actually, so you have a message and you have a body and a ticker. So if you have, maybe you don't want to display the message, you could use a ticker instead, or maybe you have a group of messages. It might make more sense to do a ticker message. You'll have to play around with the idea to whatever best fits your needs. So what we want to do next, after we've kind of defaulted these values, is we want to say do add on message received callback. So what we're doing is we're initializing this. We're initializing this function on line 6, so that way when the application loads and a notification is scheduled, it knows this is the function that's going to be executed when we click on something in the background. Because notifications do run in the background. Your app doesn't need to be open to see them. All right, let's go ahead and wipe out this view model function. We're going to create a different function, view model dot schedule equals function. And let's go ahead and say local notifications dot schedule. And we're going to set our properties here for this for this notification that we're going to schedule. So we're going to say ID this.id, title is this.title, body this.body, ticker this.ticker, and then finally a timestamp on when this should be scheduled at. So we're actually going to set a date in the future. We're going to say new date dot get time plus, and it's actually going to be in milliseconds that we're setting it. So let's go ahead and say 5 milliseconds. So 5 times 1,000 is 5 seconds. All right. So there's actually a lot of other different properties that you could add to a schedule task. Again, you'd probably want to look at the official documentation for that. But at a bare minimum, this should be fine. Put a semicolon there. Actually, we're going to say then. And that's in case it was successful. If it was a failure, we're going to say error console.log error. And I don't know if it was successful, let's say a message. Console.log notification scheduled. All right. That's all that there is to it when it comes to our view model. These properties right here, 19 through 22, they're actually going to be bound to our UI, which we're going to create in just a little while. But you can definitely add more to it as well. Next up, we want to go ahead and we want to look at our main page.js. So this is our controller. This is where I like to do a lot of initialization that doesn't really have to do with the data layer. This is just initializing our page. So in this case, we're actually, this notification plugin on iOS in particular, some newer versions of Android as well, it requires that you request permission to use notifications. So this is where we're going to request permission. Otherwise, they're not going to work. So we're going to say, you know what? First, I got to include it. So var local notifications equals require NativeScript local notifications. All right, now I can use it. Local notifications dot request permission, then granted. So we're going to see if they were granted. If granted, do something. Otherwise, we won't show any kind of error. What we do want to check is when they were granted, is then we want to load our view model. So even if you've already accepted the request for granting permissions, it'll still be indicated that they were granted, and it will still succeed. So this happens when you're presented with the prompt to accept, as well as if you've already accepted. What it doesn't do is it doesn't let you accept if you've already declined. You've got to do that in the settings of your device if you want to do that. So let's go ahead and save it. So at this point, we're requesting permission. If permission is true, then we're going to create the view model. The view model is going to allow us to schedule the notification and then decide what to do if a notification was clicked. Last up is the UI. So we do want to create some fields that will bind to our view model. So let's go ahead and work on that. Let me first align everything. All right, so we have our stack layout. It's basically just going to be a form. So what we can do is we can say something like text field ID equals ID. Hint, let's say numeric ID value. Then text equals, this is going to be what we've bound inside of our view model. So in this case, we called it ID. Let's go ahead and create another field. I'll just clone this line. Do it 2 times here. All right, so the next one we had ID, so this one I believe would be title. Let's call this title. And I think we also called it title inside of our view model. So the next up would be our body. We can call that message and body. And then finally we had one more. This one would be the ticker. Perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to add another stack layout because this is going to be where our buttons are. So we're going to say stack layout, and we're going to add a button. We're going to say text equals schedule, and the tap event is going to bind to that function that we created called schedule. All right, so our UI should be done. Everything should be done at this point. And if we're lucky, it should be able to run without any errors. So I'm going to open up my simulator in terminal again. This time I'm going to say TNS run Android, and it should start building it. I did miss something inside of the stack layout. I just realized it. I didn't set an orientation, but maybe it won't be an issue. I know that we technically didn't really need a stack layout because everything's already vertical. But you never know. Let's wait for it to finish building. All right, so the simulator's up and running. Let's go ahead and use the default value as our ID. Let's say, let's type in something. Let's say, what do we call this? NativeScript notification. For the message, let's go ahead and say, I don't know, what should we say? We should say, this is a cool tutorial by Nick Raboy. And for the ticker, let's say new tutorial. And we're going to schedule that. It should be 5 seconds. I'm going to close out of here. Should see a notification at the top here. And it looks like it happened, but my simulator is a little wonky. So it did show up in my notifications. So if I click it, it did show an alert, but the alert was automatically dismissed by NativeScript. So what you do, you definitely want to probably use something other than an alert. So let's see if we can change it up a bit. And you can see that the button, me adding the stack layout didn't really affect anything. So I'm not going to change the orientation, but let's go ahead and instead of an alert, let's just do a console log. And let's say notification data.title, and close that off. Let's say notification data.id, and we'll erase the dialogues. All right, let's see how that works out. I'm going to run it again. All right, this time I'm not going to set anything. I'm just going to hit schedule. Yeah, in reality, it should show the notification, but I think it's just my simulator being weird. So I'm going to click it. You can see that the notification was logged when I clicked it. So it was just a weird thing with the alerts. I wouldn't worry too much about it because you'd probably never find yourself showing an alert after it gets clicked. Like I said, you'd probably store this information inside of application settings or similar and do something after the fact. So you just saw how to schedule local notifications in a NativeScript Android app in particular. Like I said, this works fine with iOS as well. I've tested it, and there are a lot of use cases for it, and you'll probably find yourself using it more often than you think.